looking for them. And I don't know that they even have them. The picture in the room. Yeah, I just don't know if they even got them. Morning.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm good.
You sound tired.
Well, I got grandkids and mothers to take care of, and
List goes on and on.
I was thinking this morning, taking care of 6 people, I'm 64 years old, it really ought, you ought not have to take care of 6 people when you're that old.
Did you go by there this morning?
Well, I forgot to put her medicine out yesterday, so I had to go by this morning, and I took her a card and Cracker Barrel thing, so she don't need no clothes, and I told Hope, she said, what am I gonna do? I said, you take her some flowers, I'll get her a card to eat, and that's about all she needs, I mean.
Yeah.
She got money to spend, she buys clothes every week at Walmart, so I said, look what I got at Walmart. So she's got clothes, and one day her and Hope went on buying and spree and bought rugs for the front porch and pillows and everything like that, so there was,
Yeah, she doesn't need
and she
anything.
doesn't need anything, she got new pillows, she got new rugs to go in her kitchen one day, and
You got your glass clean kit.
I need to put a clean in here. There's that one, it'll work.
what'd y'all do? You cooked hamburgers for somebody Friday night, didn't you?
Oh, all day Friday.
All day Friday?
Yeah,
What did y'all have all day Friday?
the lodge has a annual hamburger cooking selling. And, they serve lunch and supper, so, Todd got over at 8 o'clock, I didn't get there till 10. And, he was already cooking burgers when I got there, we cooked burgers all the way to 6 o'clock.
And they eat them up?
They eat all of them at 33.
Really, that's pretty good.
But that was for
But it's for
scholarship.
scholarship. They give a scholarship to a McKenzie student, a Huntington student, and a Clarksburg student every year.
That's nice.
$1,000, so.
It's for a
Let's see,
good cause.
Yeah.
but it really wasn't planning on, I wasn't planning on doing it at all. But, Thursday, I went to work at there early as usual, but I didn't leave till 2 and almost 1:30 in the morning, something like that.
He lied to me, cause it was
I
supposed to.
got home around 2.
Well, it was 2:30 when you woke me up laughing. He was dreaming
I was dreaming.
and laughing enough that he was woken.
Oh.
Shaking the bed.
I woke myself up.
Good morning.
And you woke yourself up,
I
that's,
did.
that's pretty weird.
Yeah.
when
How you
wake
doing?
yourself
But the
up.
bad thing was, he was
Good.
just laying there, the bed was shaking, and I was like, what? And then I was awake, and then he was still laughing after, like, it was funny, but it wasn't. But anyway, he was supposed to not work past 12, that was what he had told me.
I worked a little past 12, about 1 o'clock.
What did you tell me the burger cooking was for?
The scholarship
Oh, okay.
fundraiser.
So you were you selling them?
Mhm.
Well, why didn't you tell us that? Would have come down and bought some.
Well,
I guess the subtle hint should have told me something.
Well, I just thought y'all were having a doings for y'all out there or something.
no, this was a fundraiser. I really didn't figure you wanted to come get a burger for supper.
From
It-
Huntington.
It was a burger, a bag of chips, a bottle of water, and a cookie. And it was drive-through, you couldn't eat it there. You
Yeah.
had to- And so, that's just not my
But
idea of a
the
meal.
last they
You know what I
had
mean?
8 packs.
It would've been good for
of
lunch.
them good
you know?
quality burgers, and then they ran out, so they went and got a real hamburger. So
Well, did you have a good turnout then?
the last ones would have been
Uh,
the
They were
best
the
ones.
best ones.
We cooked 8 cases of burgers and we sold them all we sold all but one case before lunch. Last year, they bought 8 cases and wound up not cooking 3 of them. So, they wound up going to buying more meat, and we cooked another, 100, let's see, each. We had 5 boxes of ham patties, and it was 32 burgers to a box. We cooked
Okay.
every one of them, they sold them all but 33,
Okay,
so, we should be able to give $1,000 to each student.
so you said it's sold this year, they do that for supper time or lunchtime?
Lunch and supper.
Oh, okay,
They fire the grill up at 8, start selling like 10:30.
Yeah.
But last year they only sold
But,
3
yeah,
cases.
because of COVID,
Yeah.
last year they didn't.
Yeah.
Didn't do good last year at all.
Well, this year,
But,
everybody outdo
But
it.
no, it went pretty good.
We're all fed up.
I was sunburned,
Enough of it, and I
my
think
head's
it's
still,
so.
so,
you don't have a hat?
Yeah.
I forgot it.
You're not used to being outside all the time, you do.
Which I worked up until the morning, Friday morning anyway at work. I worked about a 19-hour day
Yeah.
at work. And, then she got up, I just got up. Anyway, I was tired,
I can imagine.
anyway.
Friday night, we took the kids to skate rink and we went to the Fresh Market, didn't we?
Fresh market,
And we got up yesterday morning, went and ate breakfast, and Taylor went with us, we went to the clubhouse.
Yep.
Doodle around, and home.
I have ticked back and forth to Miss Sally all week long, they had a lot of trees and stuff blowing down their yard, Monday night. And I don't know whether they ever called it a tornado or not, but
They called it straight line wind.
down at the lake, they called it a tornado. It even,
Radio.
it's, it even tore up stuff down the river as far as Houston County. That's way on down the river. It's not past the ferry, but it's pretty close, I would think. I went down and worked one afternoon, and a guy called me and told me he didn't know whether I'd be able to make it to his house or not if I took the regular road, because there was 48 trees blown down, and he called it a tornado. And so, anyway,
They may have
But-
on that way.
yeah.
But what the radio called it here was straight line wind.
they call it straight line wind, but it's kinda
And
strange, it
it
just
right
started
there.
right there, started right at the
If-
Sonic in
If
Paris.
you're talking about the one that come through on Thursday, that what, I don't think that was a tornado, I think that was straight line winds. It was a band about, looking at the radar, but it went across 3 or 4 states, and it was moving fast.
Ruthline
And,
said she was sitting there and she said, she thought it was fine, and she said there's 4 little dogs, she has 1 and 3, she was sitting with the lady right behind the, pockets over there. And she said all of a sudden them dogs, all 4 of them come running and jumped in her lap, she said they got up underneath her as tight as they could, and she said it wasn't but a minute or 2, and then she started hearing the limbs and stuff
Yeah.
in the house, so.
And
I
it
said, well,
was-
did you hear a tornado? She said, no, I just heard wind, so.
But the one that hit Paris was Monday night, and the one that hit down halfway to the lake then was a week ago, last Wednesday night, so, yeah, we had,
That one was a tornado.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we had 2 big storms in Henry County in 6 days' time.
Yeah.
And I don't reckon there are any fatalities.
There was 1 death,
Was there,
yes.
in Paris or
No,
what?
not in Paris, it was
Dresden.
Dresden, in Dresden.
She was 49.
She was in her
House
bed.
fell on the yard, on her
On a
house.
tree, yeah.
A tree.
Yeah, it even hit over
Tree
Dresden.
fell.
We saw that yesterday afternoon. We went over that way, so, yeah. Anyway, Ron, Sally sent me a picture of Ron standing in the yard, and he's got his hand up in the air pointing like that, and this root ball is still about look like another 4 or 5 feet taller than he is. Huge tree in their yard. I just told Sally, I said, well, tell Ron I'm a positive thinker. I said, just look at it this way, there'll be less leaves to rake this fall. But there was a lot. And then where those fell, they could have fell toward the house, but I don't think any of them did. Everything was good. I won't be here the next 2 weeks. I'll be in California next Sunday and hopefully almost home the following Sunday. Anyway, so I'm flying out on Wednesday on my $43 plane ticket. I'm kinda interested in seeing what I'm flying on. It may be a Cessna, who knows? $43, cost me more to ship my gear than it did to fly on the plane. I said I should have bought 2 plane tickets, it'd been cheaper. Anyway, so, but I'm looking forward to seeing everybody out there, getting back home too, anyway. You haven't made a mention on the prayer list.
Just everyone all around us. David Jarrett, you know, he passed away with cancer. His wife's struggling. She's, of course, they was married 30-some odd years.
Yeah.
He was only 51 when they died.
Oh,
so
yeah.
She's having a tough time of it.
Did you hear me say Jerry Laughlin's wife, Betty Laughlin, had cancer?
Yeah.
Huh?
We saw them a week ago, yesterday, down at Bobby G's.
Remember Bobby G?
She told us.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They've been together for
Okay,
a good while, and,
okay. Last I knew they wasn't together.
do what?
They were split for a while.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that they was back together.
I didn't know they'd ever split.
Me neither.
But she has cancer on her pelvic. But it's some, I said, well, they're gonna operate to take it out. She said, it's not something they can, so she's been taking treatments. And the only reason why I knew it, she looked really good. I said, your hair is really pretty, and she said, I've got a wig on. And then she told me.
Okay. Richard, you wanna open us in prayer?
I will. Gracious Father, we thank you this day and the blessings of it. We thank you this Mother's Day. Lord, pray God that you bless all the mothers here. Bless their lives and how they watch over their children, their grandchildren. Pray God that you just bless them in a special way today. They are special to us, and we don't want to ever forget that. We thank you, Lord, for the mother of all mothers, and that's the mother of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. We thank you for that gift that you bestowed upon us so many years ago that has really impacted our lives, even to this day and beyond. I pray, God, that you be able to write down now as the offers of word. Pray, God, that you prepare the words that you'd have brought to us, Lord, that we take those words and take this lesson and apply to our hearts and our lives and use it for your honor and your glory. Pray, God, for the service to come, Lord, that even though it's Mother's Day and the messages will be geared toward that, Lord, we know that your word can be inspired at any time, in any situation, for salvation to occur. And we pray, God, that today will be the day of salvation for someone. So pray, God, as you lead us out, you hide us and direct us all. We do and forget what we've done. These things we ask in the holy name. Amen.
Amen. Well, it's only fitting this morning we'll talk about mothers. And I was thankful this morning in my prayers for all the good mothers that I have known in my life. Neighbors, my own children's mother, my mother, and just different ones. And then I think if I could start listing one of the qualities of a good mother, goodness, they just go on and on and on. The qualities. But then, as I was thinking, I thought about one particular time in my life when I was younger and I was working at the hospital. I guess I lived a sheltered life when I was growing up and didn't realize some of the things that went on in the world, and which that was another quality of a good mother right there. She protected me and kept me from knowing things that I didn't need to know about, or seeing things I didn't need to see. And I was working in the hospital and there's a little baby was in the hospital, and it always struck home to me when we had children in the hospital when I worked there that were close to the same age as mine were. And it happened more than one time. And just, I don't know, I have a compassion for children anyway. But this one particular time, this one child was in the hospital, and I went in and worked 11 to 7, and I got there at 11 o'clock, and the grandmother was there with the baby that night, and the mother was not there. And it had been in the hospital, seemed like several days, and I thought, this is strange that the mother's not here tonight. And so, in a few minutes, long about midnight, she appeared to spend the rest of the night with the baby. But her arms was all red. I mean, red. Hands, arms, everything, red. And of course, I said, "What's wrong with your arms?" And she said, "Well, it was one call through stain." She said, "It's Jello." I said, "Jello?" She said, "Yeah." She said, "I went Jello wrestling tonight." I thought, Jello wrestling? Your child is in the hospital and you're Jello wrestling. Of course, I didn't say anything because it was not my job to say anything, but I thought, this is unbelievable. And I'm sure as soon as I got home the next morning, I probably woke Cindy up and told her, there's a woman went Jello wrestling and left her child in the hospital. Her mother was there with her, but still she left her there with someone else so she could go Jello wrestling. I thought, this is not what, if I was putting qualities of a good mother up here, I would not put up here, one of the qualities was to leave the child at the hospital and go Jello wrestling for sure. To me, the quality of a good mother, if the child's in the hospital, guess what? The mother is usually going to be there with them, sitting there with them every time the child needs something. They're there taking care of them. Lots of dads are that way, but dads seem to be in second line there when it comes to a child wanting their mother. That's what they want. A lot of times we see older people, and also when I worked at the hospital, I'd see older people that were starting to lose their memory, and they would ask for their mother. There's a close bond there. Cindy and I picked up a little lady one time. Her grandmother's in a nursing home, and we started at home going Sunday afternoon, late in the winter, or late in the fall. Wasn't bad cold weather, it was starting to get cold. And just almost dark, we left the nursing home out on the old Mackenzie Highway, our old Murray Highway in Paris. And this little lady was running down the road, just running. And as I got almost to her, I looked over Cindy and I said, I think, isn't that little lady that was standing in the front door of the nursing home when we went in? And she said, I think it is. So I stopped. And I said, would you like a ride? And she said, sure. So I got out and opened the back door before she got in the back seat with the kids. And I said, where are you going? And she said, I'm going up here to the end of the road. Said, my mother's waiting for me up there. And I thought, uh-oh. And so I realized that she had run away from the nursing home, but she was going to see her mother. That was the hint right there. I knew her mother was not going to be waiting at the end of the road for her. So I made some kind of excuse and went back to the nursing home, and we took her back. And I went in and told them, I asked them about this. I described them, and the nurse says, oh, said, that Miss So-and-so said she'd been standing in the door all evening long looking for her mother to come get her. And I said, well, she's in my car out here. So the rest of the story is they came out to get her, and as soon as they opened the door to get her out, she said, she got out, she pointed a little finger at me, she said, you told on me. And she said, I'm gonna give you a whooping. And the nurses said, this young man did you a favor, said he brought you home before you got too far from here, said it's been dark, you've been out in the cold. But yeah, she was looking for her mother. I want to talk about some of the things that mothers do for their children. They love them, they take care of them, they make sure they have clean clothes, they make sure they have good food to eat, they keep their house clean for them, they sleep in a nice warm bed, they try to teach them stuff that they don't learn in school, teach them, girls are taught how to cook, sometimes the boys are taught how to cook. Mother teaches them all the things more than likely, and even more sometimes than their own mother taught them. To me, it's important to have a godly mother. I see so many that just don't pay attention to anything at all about teaching the children about God or about God's ways or anything at all that's in the Bible. It just seems like it's irrelevant to them. But one of the things that mothers are most noted for, seems like, it's not necessarily the discipline part. Usually, I'm afraid, the discipline part falls on the father's hands, because you hear so many times the mothers say, just wait till your daddy gets home. Okay, I don't want to wait till daddy gets home. My mother probably spanked me more than my daddy did. I know she lectured me more. I really took a spanking than a lecture. Anyway, when I got older, I think she thought it's not going to hurt him to spank him. I just give him a long lecture here. Anyway, one of the things mothers does is they give up. Not give up on their kids, but they give up for their kids. You give things up. Like there was a poem or a story several years ago, and it said, isn't it odd that whenever there's only 2 pieces of apple pie left on the plate, and there's 2 kids, that mom says, I really wasn't hungry for apple pie anyway. They give up. And so we see 3 mothers in the Bible that gave up, but they gave up something more than just a piece of apple pie, or they gave up something more than just a bite to eat, or a place to sit, or things like that. But these 3 gave up the child itself. And maybe more than 3 mothers in the Bible, but the 3 that's outstanding to me are the 3 that I studied and learned a little bit more about than I already knew myself. The very first one, the name is not mentioned at all. She's found in the book of Solomon, or Kings, I'm sorry. I found in the book of Kings, I think it's along about chapter 16. And talks about King Solomon. King Solomon was a young king. He started out being king, he was 12 years old. And the people in the kingdom were so worried about, how long, kind of like some of us feel now, how long we will tolerate this. Because they didn't have much trust in someone that young. But King Solomon had chosen wisdom as something that he wanted to have. And also, I think David had also asked God to give his son Solomon wisdom too. And because of it, because he didn't ask for riches and glory and fame and all this kind of stuff, it said that he was the wisest man who had ever lived, and quite possibly the wisest man who has ever lived, along with the richest man also. I couldn't find it in the Bible, but it made mention in the commentary that I read that King Solomon could discern what animals were actually saying to each other. He could look at people's faces and tell if they were telling a lie or not. He could observe people's countenance and figure out what they were up to. He was very wise. And so it says in one particular time, it doesn't really give us what age Solomon was when this event happened, but 2 women were brought to him and they had a problem. And the things he observed was this. The very first thing is, the story goes that these 2 women lived in the house together. They both had a son apiece. One was only 3 days older than the other one. And the oldest one died during the night. And this is all that Solomon was getting. There's no one else living in the house. And so, the question comes to your mind real quick, well, where was the dad? Well, it says in the Bible, there were 2 harlots. They were prostitutes. They were not married. There was no husband. So these 2 women raising 2 children on their own, 2 babies.
Well, I never thought about that, but it never did mention that.
There is no man. That's why I didn't mention it. Anyway, and so when they appeared before King Solomon, the first one gave her testimony, or gave her a case, and she started out by saying that the 2 of them lived in the house. They lived there together. No strangers were in the house. No one else was there except the 2 of them. No one that could notably describe or identify which baby belonged to which. And she said that I had my son, and 3 days later, her son was born. And she said during the night, she rolled over on her son and smothered him. And when she got up and when she recognized that he was dead, she got up sometime during the night and put her son in my bosom and took the living son and put him in her bosom. And she goes on to say a whole lot more. And so then he turned to the second mother, and we'll call her mother number 2 because there's no name for him. He turned to the second mother, and when he turned to her, and her testimony was, the living son is my son, and the dead son is hers. Solomon probably observed this. We're just going to guess here and speculate, but he probably observed the fact that the second mother when she talked about the children, she talked about the living son first. And she said, the living son is my son, and the dead son is hers. That was all her case that she had. He probably also observed the fact that the first mother identified what had actually happened to the child. She had rolled over on it. She didn't say she did. She claimed the other mother had rolled over on it. How did she know what happened to the child? How did she know that maybe the child just got sick during the night, or they choked to death on his own milk or something like that? But no, she knew exactly what had happened to it. She said she rolled over on her child and smothered it, and then she took the dead child and put it in my bed, and took the live child and put it in her own bed and claimed it to be her own. Each time she talked about the child, she talked about the dead son first. The first mother did. Talked about the dead son first, and talked about the living son second. Anytime the second mother testified, she identified the first son, the living son is my son, the dead son is hers. She always identified the living son first as her own. So Solomon did something. More than likely, it says, Solomon could have probably already looked and seen between these two women which one this child actually belonged to. Because anyone who can look at people's faces and read their countenance and their actions and can tell whether they're telling the truth or not, knew who was telling the truth and who wasn't. But he had to let the people of Israel understand how and what the reasons was that he made a decision. And so he said to them, he said, bring me a sword. And there's something in that when he said that. He was wise enough to know, no, don't say to the guard, take your sword and divide this child in half, because it might have happened so quick that he couldn't get it stopped in time. But he said, bring me the sword. Bring me a sword. And so they brought the sword to King Solomon, who had no intentions of dividing a child in half. And then he made his decision, and he said, take the sword and divide the living child, give half of it to the mother, to mother number one, half of it to mother number two. And of course, as the story goes, mother number two said, no, not only no harm comes to this child, but give this child to her, that it may live. And mother number one, who had the big argument, just said really quick, okay, divide it, and we'll both have half. She had, for someone who had argued to start with that the living son was hers, all of a sudden her only idea was, okay, well, I'll just have half and she'll have half. Now, where this judgment came from was back in Jewish law, that if two people were arguing over a piece of material, just over a piece of material, and one had one end in one hand, one had one end in the other, and a judgment had to be decided, then what they would do was they would measure the material, cut the material in half, and give half up to one person, half up to the other. And that's where Solomon's decision came from as far as dividing something among two people who argued over it. But at the same time, they said it would have been a simple-minded idea. Of course, it would not have meant a human being, but Solomon used the same process. And so, when he told them this, and both the mothers made their points on what they wanted to be done, Solomon said, give the child to the second mother. Now, he had repeated their case to them already. It says he used the exact words that they did in order to make sure that I'm getting this right now. This is what happened, and looked at the other one and said, and this is what you say happened. And they had a chance to say, no, so he had it all right. And he told them, he said, give this child to the true mother, to number two, for she is the real mother. And because of this, because of the people of Israel seeing what a good decision he made and how wise he was in this, their hearts were changed, and they rejoiced. And what a wise king they had. How smart he is. And they realized, hey, we got something good here. God had blessed him with wisdom. And so we see...
I've never heard that if you were arguing over something, you split it in two. I've never heard that.
I hadn't either. I guess that's why we have Sunday school. so we can all learn something. Anyway, had y'all ever heard that? Yeah. So anyway, That's the first mother who is willing to give up her child in order for this child to live. The second mother then, of course you already know who that is. Her name was Jochebed, and she was Moses' mother. And we all know why the children of Israel were in Egypt. They were in Egypt because Joseph was sold into bondage, and he became a great leader in Egypt, second-hand man to Pharaoh during the famine, and he was very well thought of. And so when the Hebrew children, or the Israelites, came to live in Egypt along with Joseph, then everything was good. Because, hey, this Pharaoh knew Joseph. He knew that Joseph had helped deliver them from a famine, and his family was welcome there. But as time went on, Joseph passed away. Probably all his brothers are dead now. More than likely they are. And there's a whole new regime, you might say. A whole new government with whole new plans. And they needed people to work, and so the Hebrews was doing the work. But then they also noticed that there's going to be a lot of them. There's going to be a whole lot of them. And then they got to thinking that there might be more of them than there are us sometimes. And so it says they were even very concerned, even to the fact that they might even been starting to be scared. And so they did some afflictions on them. They made them make brick that much harder, and made them do this and made them do that. But he says the more they inflicted them, the more they inflicted hardships on them, the more children that they had. And I guess I shouldn't say this, but I thought, well, I guess when they took away all the fun stuff they had to do, the only thing they had to do was to be with each other, and so the more children they had. But that's what it said. He said the more inflictions they had, the more children they had, and the more the Hebrew population grew. And God had promised Abraham early in Genesis that the Hebrew nation his seed would be as much as dust on the earth, not sand on the seashore. You think about that. I think the Midianites were counted as compared to as many as sand on the seashore. But when you think about dust on the earth, there's a big difference there. I mean, you can pick up a grain of sand. I mean, it's not easy, but you can pick it up and let it sift until all of it just rolls off your hand, until it just got 1 grain or 2 grains, and you kept messing with it until there's only 1 grain of sand still left sitting there. Okay, and there's lots of grains of sand on the seashore, but try that with some dust sometime. Try to pick up a handful of dust and then keep separated until there's only 1 grain of dust there. I think it'd be pretty minute. I've never tried it. I know I've had to wash a lot of dust off, but but dust is tiny. It's tinier than a piece of sand. And in the Bible it says that the Hebrew children would be his seed would be as dust, as much as the dust of the earth. And it says, so if anyone can count the dust of the earth, then they could be able to count how many Hebrews that there are. And so
I realized I'd heard that before, but it never really dawned on me that still the grain is salt. I mean, it's a sand. That one seemed to have stuck more, grains of sand. But I never had really thought about the dust one. That was like you said, that was even more.
Dust never goes away.
Yeah, it's always there, and you really can't capture one piece of it, I don't think.
I don't want to try it. But yeah, but when you think about that, you think, wow, that's even more. That's a whole lot more than just the sand is. But anyway, and so the more afflictions they put on them, the more children they had. And so finally, Pharaoh come up with an idea, and it was a terrible device. But he said, tell all the Hebrew handmaids, or all the Hebrew, not handmaids, but what do they call them? What do they call them? The
Concubines?
No. Oh, the ones that deliver babies.
Midwives.
Midwives. Tell all them. Make a rule that all of the Hebrew midwives, if a boy child is born, that is to be killed. It's okay for the the girl children to live, but not the boys. And so, at that particular time, it was the guys who were who'd been in their armies and things like that, and who had been the heads of the house, and on and on and on. And so that would start to deplenish the Hebrew nation by doing that. And so he made this rule. Well, there's already one family who had 2 children, and they had one named Miriam and they had one named Aaron. And it says it's quite possible that this family could have also reached out and prayed and asked for a deliverer. Doesn't ever talk about his family doing this, but they could have been one of the families that prayed. It says the cries of the people came up before the Lord after Moses was already grown, but more than likely it wasn't just that particular time. It's probably hardship before that that they cried for a deliverer. They would have wanted an immediate deliverer, more than likely. But it says when Moses was born, they didn't destroy him. And his mother kept him, and it said she nursed him for 3 months. It gave you the period of time on how long she was able to hide him. But as we all know, everybody in here, people listening, has had children, you know, you can pretty well keep a child quiet when they're a month old and keep them happy and 2, but when they get to about 3 and 4 months old, they're gonna make some racket. And so you say, well, you know, they lived in the land of Goshen. Why would there be any Egyptians there to hear a boy child cry? Well, there might not have been any Egyptians there, but you know what? People are human beings. They just are. And if you had one lady who had a boy child and it had been destroyed, and next thing you know, your neighbor's got one and he's still alive, people are just human. Oh, why does she have one and mine is gone? And so she had to keep him quiet. And after 3 months, something else had to be done. A new plan had to be brought in place. And so it says, I'm sure she prayed to God and asked him what to do. I'm sure she prayed and asked what the route, what the destination was, what the plan needed to be. Doesn't ever tell us that God told her what to do, but more than likely she had faith that God was going to take care of him. And so, it says she made a basket, made an ark, and put slime and pitch on it, and then took him down to the Nile River and put him in the river. But she didn't just put him out in the river because, you know, we've all played in a stream and stuff when we was kids, and I've actually even done it since I was grown. Drop something in the water and see how far it would float before it catches on something. And so she couldn't put him out in the current, out in the edge where it float out in the current and get washed down the river. But she put him amongst the bulrushes. I'm not really sure what a bulrush is. I think it's something like a cattail probably. And cattails grow all on the edge of the banks and ponds and rivers. But she put him amongst the bulrushes, and so it could float in kind of like, you know, you might say in a guarded area there where it wouldn't float out. And the water would rise and lower as tide or whatever come along, or even storms or more rains or whatever, and the water would rise, but it would still stay in there, in the reeds. But I don't think he stayed long. He says, but his sister Miriam was sent down to watch. She probably hid on the side of the river there and sit and watched as things happened during the day. And one afternoon, and it was not a happenstance, but it was probably a daily thing, or at least a weekly thing. And the prince and the princess and all her handmaids came down to the river. I think they came down to wash. I don't think they came down to ski or to do anything crazy like that. They just came down as a daily ritual to wash there in the river, or maybe just to wade or whatever. But it says that she walked along the side of the river, whether she noticed the basket or whether the baby cried or whatever, the basket was, as they say, the plot starts to thicken. And when it does, she sends the handmaid out, tells her to go out and get that. There's something out there. And so she brought it to the shore, and they opened it up, and as soon as they opened it up, Moses started to cry. And, doesn't tell us exactly what it does say. It says that she looks at the baby and recognizes it as being one of the Hebrews' children. Probably had compassion on him. She probably thought to herself, somewhere there's a Hebrew mother that's worried about this child right here. Or maybe she might have thought like I did about the Jello wrestling mother. She might have thought, somewhere there's a Hebrew mother that's abandoned his child. I don't know what she thought, except the fact that there's a Hebrew mother. This is a Hebrew child. She didn't follow her father's ideas about what should be done with Hebrew children. It said it gives us a glimpse of what God can do with anyone. He can use anyone if they will be used. Put it that way. And he used her. He changed her heart and gave her the heart of someone who had compassion on a child, instead of looking and saying, this one was Hebrew children. I'm taking my father because there's a law that says this child's not supposed to be alive. God changed her heart. Gave her a heart of compassion. Gave her a heart of love. He also gave her a heart of, what am I going to do with this baby? I don't know nothing about babies. And so Miriam, Moses' sister, came up and she said, would you like me to go and find somebody to take care, to nurse, what she got, to nurse this child for you? And she said, sure. Yeah. And so, even though Moses' mother gave him up to start with as a child, put him in a basket, did it for his own safety, did it for his own good. And then she ended up raising him, and it says more than likely he probably was at our house as long as he was a toddler, until he got big enough to go and live in the courts with the Egyptian princess, who still called herself, I guess, probably looked at herself as being his mother. But it said more than likely, as Moses grew up, his mother probably set him on his knee and talking about the creation, talking about who God was, talking about Father Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, talking about how they all ended up in Egypt. He probably knew all about Joseph and all of his family, all the great things that God had done in his life thus far. And more than likely, she probably told him several times about and how she had probably put him in a basket when he was little and put him in the bulrushes to save his life. It says when he went to live with the Egyptians, they probably taught him about all kind of math, all kind of science, all kind of way to build things, architectural designs, about all the different false gods they had in their land. But he said more than likely, even after all of the good things that the Egyptians taught him, the great things that Moses' mother taught him about God, overwhelmed, outreached what the Egyptians taught him about false gods. And so we see a mother here that not only gave her son up once, but she gave him up twice. She gave him up first to put him in the river to save his life. The second time she gave him up was to go and live with the princess in the royal palace. But then we see the rest of the story and we understand, we see Moses, the great deliverer, one who walked with God, and he is one of the people that's actually mentioned in the Bible when you look in it, when you punch up the word, someone who walked with God. Moses' name is one of the very first ones that comes up. He had his downfall sometimes, he had his shortcoming, but at the same time, Moses was a man who walked with God. So there you have two mothers. One that we have no idea what her name was, but we know more about her background now than I did to start with. And then we have the second one in, Jochebed, who was Moses' mother. And then, very last one, the third one, is Hannah. And so we see Hannah with the second wife of her husband, and the first wife had children. And I'm not really sure how many that his first wife had, but she had children. And Hannah did not have children. At that particular time in life, not having children was just like, oh, you don't have any children, do you? Cindy and I were married 6 years before we had our first one. And people look at us that way. Why don't y'all have any kids? Well, because we were kids ourselves. That's why. And we had a lot of growing up to do on our own before we brought somebody else into the world. And we did. A lot of people have children pretty quick. And a lot of people don't understand why people don't want to have kids just as soon as they get married. But Cindy and I are different kind of people, I guess. So we didn't have Jill till we was married almost 6 years when she was born. And they probably looked at Hannah the same way. You don't have any children, do you? And if it wasn't bad enough that she didn't have any children, and other people probably looked down on her like, oh, there must be something wrong with her. And finally, even her, what would you call a woman that's married to your husband and you're married to her too? You wouldn't be a sister-in-law. I guess you'd be a wife-in-law. I don't know what you mean. Anyway, but the other wife even got to making fun of her too. And that, that really hurts. Instead of trying to be understanding and saying, well, you can help me raise mine, she was kind of just the opposite. And looked down on her. And so, because of this, they went to the temple one particular day, there in the temple, and Hannah prayed to God and asked God for a son. And she prayed in such a way, and she cried when she prayed in such a way that some of the priests thought there was something wrong with her. I think she'd been drinking or something. What is wrong with this woman? And but she prayed, and God heard her prayers. But the thing she said in her prayers was not just, I want a child, I want one really bad. But she prayed and she said, I will dedicate my son to the priesthood. I will dedicate my son to you, to live and serve you. And so, in days to come, Hannah was with child, and when the child was born and was old enough, same as Moses, I guess, they didn't tell us an age, but when he was old enough, his name was Samuel. And Samuel went to live with Eli in the temple and to serve God. And God gave him a great calling. And we see Samuel as being one of the greater, whether you want to call him a prophet or not, but one of the greater men in the Bible. Had to do say a lot of harsh things to people sometimes. When he told King Saul he had done foolishly, but he was a great leader, and helped the people in right directions. God, that fact that it was Samuel that the people finally came to him and said to him, "We want a king. We want a king of our own." And Samuel said, "You've got a king. God is your king. Oh, we want one that we can see. We want one that can go out into battle for us. One that we can look at as a leader. We want a king like other people have." And Samuel talked with God. He didn't say he prayed with God or prayed to God, but it said he talked with God. And he told God what they wanted and what the people had done. And God told him, said, don't be disheartened about it. Don't let it upset you. They've not rejected you, they've rejected me. And he gave him probably one of the most profound things to say to people that people have ignored in history. But he told them, he said, you tell them if they want a king that I'll give them a king. But this king is going to be someone who's going to take